The following is a production of the Dallas Genealogical Society. For more information, please visit our website at dallasgenealogy.org.
Recording in
Okay, so now we're being recorded. Is there anything I said before that if you didn't catch it? Sorry. Okay, now go back to here. This one is a little bit different. It's the Max Kade Institute German-American Singing Festivals, which was a big thing that they enjoyed doing. Read a lot in Texas Hill Country, but throughout the country. This one is done by the University of Wisconsin. It's a singing group up there. And that will be a presentation at noon on April 5th. The Mid-Atlantic Germanic Society has a virtual spring conference on April 22nd. That should be 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. You can see the 4 topics there. Registration is $60 if you go to their store page for the Mid-Atlantic Germanic Society. And then our next meeting will be on May 13th, again at 10:30 a.m. And our speaker will be Brenda Watlington. She is from the Plano Family Search Center, and she'll be talking about German and Eastern European research on family search. There's lots and lots of resources there on family search. And if you haven't looked at them, to find the ones that'll probably be the most interest to you, that will be our next meeting here in the library and again online. And now just a quick poll. Where's my launching?
I think it's on the not one. I think you have to click the not one. No. Oh, I'm over to the side. Oh, the dot.
Okay, hang on here.
No. You just hit the.
Can't I do it from down here?
No, you gotta do it from that screen. Try clicking on that attendance on something.
Okay, we're checking for a second here. Any background questions?
You gotta be somewhere on that line.
Let me just try to get polls. Great. Hang on here for a second, we'll get there. Aren't computers fun?
I would think you'd have to. I think you edit it. Where do you kick it off at?
Well, that's good. The poll of nothing.
Launching the phone.
Okay, well, maybe we're not going to do the poll this time. So we'll get there. Okay. So now today's presentation will be an introduction to CompGen, German's free mega genealogy website. And I'll be using the Texas pronunciation of all the words to make it easy. Okay, again, they've recently updated their website. If you go to, it's known by a couple, GenWiki is another name, genealogy.net. There's several different ways to get to it. And of course, it'll come up in German. But if you use Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome, you can just right-click and it will translate everything into English. So about the only time you don't want to do that is when you're dealing with place names. Because if you're looking for something like Neumühl, and then you translate to New Mill, then the search engines won't understand that and won't match the two. But for most cases, yeah, so you can get it all in English. And you can use translators such as DeepL, Google Translate for other parts if you need it. This is done by an association. They're the largest one in Germany. They have over 4,000 members. They consider themselves young, that their average age is about 60 compared to other genealogical communities. And is often typical in Europe, you will find there's more male genealogists than females. It's a little bit different than what we have here. But they've been in existence for quite some time, very active volunteers. They have some good technical folks. It's a completely volunteer website. And in the Roots Tech, which was just done earlier this month, there was a presentation entitled, on the bottom, you can see 10-year data entry system experiences and perspectives. And it does talk a little bit about their society as well. And we'll see this DES show up during this presentation. Because we've got a long way to go and a short time to get there, as Smokey the Bandit would say, hold your questions to the end. You can put them into the chat while we're going, and then we'll take care of them. So they have a research top menu item, and then you click databases and scroll down a little bit, and you'll see all these various databases. And then in the upper left, if you look, there's a meta search, which searches a number of databases all at once. And I'll talk a little bit about that a bit later. But we start, the first menu item is Adressbucher. These are city directories. If you're familiar with using them in genealogy, they have many, many of those. And if you pick the start search now, but before entering a name, scroll down to the bottom, you'll see they say, okay, be aware, we made some changes as we were going along. This data entry system was done after they had started the website and had been transcribing a lot of the address books. So there's two sets. One's done with the data encryption system, and then one's done earlier that weren't. There is also a bibliography, and then some of them are in what's called DigiBib, the digital library. These are the actual digitized books. You see the actual images. Other than the DigiBib entries, anything else on the website are what we consider secondary resources, that they are not done at the time of the actual event. In many cases, they're transcriptions. So you probably want to try to find the primary source, but this gets you in the right direction. So you pick there, and there's the portal. And you can see the little numbers in the colors there are how many they have at each location. And then you can work your way zooming in to get down to the particular area where you're interested. I just picked one here for Kiel in 1935 and just looked for one of the first names on the list. There was a Boeh, B-O-E-H. And what comes up then is first an image of the entire page of the address book. And again, these even predated telephone books. And then on the right on your screen will also appear, it zooms in on that particular one. And again, you can see there's that old German printing, and it's in German as well. So, and Germans love abbreviations, if you see all the periods there. So you can sort of transcribe it, the Bohen, Glocken, Perry, Hoff, Guess, Hoffen, Wons, und. So then you could work that out as Boh and Glocken. The Perry, Hoff, Guess is abbreviation, and I found that by just doing a translation. General partners, Kaufman or merchants. So it was Johannes Glocken and the widow, Sophie Boh. Probably he was originally partners with her husband, and then the husband died. But it is sort of nice. It gives her maiden name as well. So you can check if you knew her maiden name, you've got the right one and know where they are. And if you don't, there's a clue to what her maiden name was. The next database are the Familienzeigen. Sort of translate as family ads. They're really sort of from the newspaper where you have births, marriages, deaths, obituaries, and these are mainly, it points out, mainly obituaries. And again, these have just been contributed over the years. They have over 4 million of them. Then there's the GEDBAS, which are GEDCOM files, family trees that people have created, and then they're uploading to the site. So again, this is a secondary resource. Just because they say it's so doesn't mean it necessarily is. Everybody can make some mistakes, but it gives you an opportunity to see if somebody's researching one of your particular families. Then Grabstein, maybe sort of obvious. These are tombstones. One of the advantages of this, well, sort of two, in Germany, as in most places in Europe, you rent the cemetery plot. You're not in there forever. It's usually for maybe about 25, 30 years. Then out you go, in comes somebody else. But if the tombstone's been recorded, it's either now somebody's done it or it's in the database, then you still have access to it. And anything on the tombstone is considered public record. Germany, if you're not familiar, has privacy laws that you cannot see records of births until 110 years after the birth, marriages until 80 years after it, and deaths until 30 years after. But if you find a picture of a headstone, tombstone, and has the person's birth date and death date, and maybe when they got married, all on there, that's a way to get that information that otherwise you'd have to wait 110 years to see the record of their birth, unless you're an immediate descendant. And it has to be, you can't get anything from your aunt and uncle you could get from your parents. So that's a nice little resource. Here's one example here. I always sort of look for my name and I like to see there's something. As long as I'm reading it from the top, I'm not concerned. So here we see Bernhard Meisner. And again, often you'll see families on the stones. There's probably his wife and a son all there. Next, we have the online Ortsfamilienbücher, OFBs. These are family books. Sometimes they're place books where somebody's gone through and trying to document all the members of a particular family or all the people of a particular village or town. Again, these are secondary sources. Although they are celebrating, they now have over 1,000 entries of different books that have been collected. You can go to the page and you'll see a map, and you can see it's not just current Germany, but includes Prussia and other places of German enclaves. For our German from Russian guests who are here today, there's at least something up there on the Volga and some more on the Black Sea. And you can again zoom in, or there are all these listings by region that will scroll down. And we'll talk more about these at the end of the presentation. I picked the one for Upper Franconia. Points out it has about 7,000 names that this person has entered. Over 30 years he was doing research, going through church books, often that's the primary source, and some others. They didn't have Meisners, but they did have Meister. So here's one particular entry for a Johannes Meister. And you can see the little symbols, the little asterisk, says he was born September 6th, 1671 in Oberweissenbach. And then the little cross is for death. He died November 9th, 1728 in the same place. You can see the KB, the Kirchen books, the church books is where they got that particular information. And even points out when he was baptized, the same day he was born, and they often did that. You went right to the church. He was baptized in Heimbrechts, which must have been the sort of place where the church was. Then it shows his wife, Margarita Friedrich, and you'll see when she was born, died, and then the little linked rings, they were married. And notice the dates, it's not the typical European way, 11/24, 1696, that's November 24th. Usually in Europe, it's the day, then the month. But obviously there's no 24 months in any calendar, not even when Napoleon was running around northern Germany for a while. And Johannes married Margarita, and they had a son born in 1697. And guess what? He was named Johannes. And then Johannes, the original, who married Margarita, then we see his parents. His father was Johannes. his mother was Barbara, and he had an older and younger brother, each of them named Johannes. So apparently how these were entered, they didn't include what's called the roof name or the name they were actually called. Usually when you got baptized, often you had a Johannes for males in honor of John the Baptist, but you never used that name. It's one of the other names. You didn't really have first name, middle names. You had your saint's name and then your call name. And by working through this particular family, I was actually get 5 generations, all from this address book, going way back into the early 1600s. And if we go at the top, there's Johannes Meisner and Barbara Wirth had a son, Johannes, who married a woman, Margarita. And then there's the Johannes we were looking at. He married a woman named Margarita. They had a son named Johannes. He married a woman named Margarita, and they had a son named who? Johann Nicol. And again, he was probably called Nicol. So, but there you can see some of the adventures you have in German research. 4 Johanneses, 4 Margaritas, 4 Johanns, and then a few others thrown in. But you get all those generations from one of these books. Next is the GOV, which is a gazetteer. It's an alternative to Meyer's gazetteer, where it's listing place names. You enter the name of a place, and it can tell you information about that particular place. This one is current. Meyer's gazetteer was 1912. This one that points out that you see at the bottom, anyone can contribute information after registering from free. So again, trust but verify. You can go in, do a search. My Meisters came from a little village called Pusselsheim in Bavaria. So I went ahead and entered that. And we have here 4 different choices, and the legend is there. Oops. Okay. It's a location, a church village, a parish, or the physical church. St. Burkhart's was the church. So if I go in and click on that, it gives me 2 parts. Up at the top, information and 2 maps. And then at the bottom, this diagram called superordinate objects. So the part at the top gives us the official government ID, tells me it is a village. In 1987, the population was 173. The postal code, which changed in 1993, if you want to write to the church or the civil registration office for information. There's an article that has a little bit of additional information. The geographic position, if you're in the GIS, down to the 10,000th of a degree of latitude and longitude, that's about 35 feet. It'll get you to. And points out if you want additional information, there's in Bavaria, here's some links. And it shows you there on the map, it's essentially a little bend in the road, 178 people. And that superordinate part is of import because that tells us all the hierarchy of political and religious parts. So we see at the bottom, it was a Kirchdorf, a church village. And then we have all these other parts in German, and as things changed over time. Again, the church village is where we have parish register, baptisms, marriages, and burials. And it does also have a civil registration office. So after 1876, births, marriages, deaths will be recorded there. And often if someone moved away and died, they will still get a record of that death from some other place added to there. Then it's above that is the municipality of Donnersdorf. And then above that, the Municipal Association Gerolzhofen. That's where the lower district court is. So that would be where you'd look for records of marriage contracts, permission papers, guardianships, probates, land records, land sales, and the like. Then it's in the Schweinfurt district in Unterfranken. And then in the early days, it was the Free State of Bavaria up until 1946. And again, that was broken down 1815 to 1866. It was a state, part of the Deutscher Bund. And then it became part of the German Reich. And then after World War II, then it was in the American zone. And then after 1949, it became part of what's now Germany. And in 1958, Germany became part of what's now the European Union and joined the United Nations in 1973. So you can see the whole hierarchy of organizations, which gives you an idea, in particular in the lower levels, where you can find some of the records. Next, we have the Verlustlisten. These are the casualty lists from World War I. Because so many of the records were lost in the war in the 1940s, this was a good way, they felt, to go back and reconstruct individuals. You can click and it'll show the list of casualties, and you zoom in. This was their first crowdsourcing using that digital indexing system, the DES. They went through the casualty lists, which were published. And there's two separate lists. There's the one for the German side and Prussian side, actually World War I, and then Austro-Hungary in the second. And they point out some soldiers went back and forth between the two. This says they're still working on it. The presentation we saw earlier this month in RootsTech said they finished the Austro-Hungarian ones as well. So they went through, and it's records from 1914 to 1919, World War I, all the armed forces, Army, Navy, they come from Prussia, Bavaria, wherever, drawn up by the war ministries, the Navy office, and the Colonial office. As a rule, again, when you're working with records, Krista Cowan from Ancestry always stresses you want to spend as much time learning about the records as actually using the records. So as a rule, it has the military unit, surname, first name, place of birth, military rank of the person, type of loss, dead, wounded, missing, captivity. In the first years of the war, they also said where that loss occurred. Then they figured out, wait a minute, the enemy is getting copies of these lists. That sort of cut back a bit, will no longer indicate the troop units, but we will give the date of birth. So you can figure out which of those Johannes Meisters it was. Then in the summer of 1970, they said, no, we didn't want to see we're drafting younger and younger people into the war. So we'll take that out. And then finally, at the end of the war, they would add in dates of birth and the troop units. Here you can see a picture in Berlin. These were broadsheets that were posted. And there's folks looking to see if they know any of the casualties. And then you can see one example of one of the broadsheets in the upper left. This is number 1641. And then on the right, you can see the date, September 25th, 1917. Again, I'd like to look for Meisner's. It's the old German print. But again, it's now all been indexed. Just search for the Meisner's. Here's all the different Meisner's. I did the translations at the top. Ort, of course, means the place. Lista is sort of obvious. The reg OA is the unit. Status, you can see one missing, several wounded. Tot is dead. Zurückgekehrt, they went back. Doesn't have any indication they captured this particular list. The blank columns were rank, remarks, birthday. We saw that came and went. And that addition, that's that number we saw in the upper left with the date and the actual page. And Ancestry.com has the images if you want to see the original image. Also related to that, under research, there is this name distribution map. And I sort of picked in this case the name of Schmidt, the very common name, so you can see the coverage. So again, this is for World War I. They just arbitrarily put the date of 1890 because you didn't have birth dates for a lot of them because they were omitted from the list. But they sort of figured what was the typical age of a soldier in World War I? So probably born somewhere around 1890, thereabouts. So you can see all the coverage that it is all of Prussia, just not current Germany. But it's a name distribution map, so you can also do other interesting things with it. You can enter more than one variant of a surname and see where those occur. So one of the ways you could get a surname is their physical features. And if you had curly hair, you could be a Kraus. but were you a Kraus with the E, that would have been in the eastern parts of Prussia, the red. You could be a Krus without the A, and that would be in sort of the lower parts of Germany. And Kraus without the E, but with the A, would be sort of what they consider the mountainous, the high German areas. So you can do that sort of variant. So if you knew the spelling of the name, assume you know the correct spelling, not what somebody just said it was. It can give you, help you zoom in on a particular location. I have a whole presentation I've done earlier. We have it as one of our recordings on the website of surname maps. Then the last of their research databases is with us. They invite you to participate. Again, they're looking for all sorts of ways where you can contribute information, you can index records. Then under research is GenWiki, which is again another alias. And this is probably the real heart of the website. We saw the databases, but the GenWiki, you think of Wikipedia, or the family search has the wiki, where you look for all sorts of information. We'll hear more about that at our next meeting in May. This is what comes up. It's one of their older looking pages. And you see all those little menus at the top in your handout, which is available on our website. I've sort of gone through and transcribed all those different parts for you, both in English and in German. So you have that available. But now let me just go column by column through the GenWiki. So the far left, we have current, which are the meetings of the association. They have 2 publications, a quarterly magazine, and then one they put out for beginners. These are both in German. Second column is that DigiBib. Those are all the digitized books. So these are prime sources. You can see the actual records. And again, there's 2 versions of these as well. And I'll show you how to look at each one. Basic knowledge, if you're just getting started. This again is in German. You probably can find equivalent in Family Search Wiki, for example, of that kind of information. News about local societies, and then DNA. And again, we have lots of resources here in the States on DNA. You don't necessarily have to look at the German one. What they call encyclopedias are really dictionaries, but you can look at old dimensions and dates, calendar terms. Often the baptismal records, they'll refer to the different names of the Sundays. One of my favorite was always Septuagesima Sunday. And you're saying, huh, what? And you go look, it's the 7th Sunday after. So it's related to Easter and Advent and the like. Foreign terms, job titles, disease names. You look to see on the death record of what somebody died. Names in kinship. They have differences, different names for your wife's brother, which you would call brother-in-law, and the husband of your wife's sister, who we would probably also call a brother-in-law, but they have different names. You can distinguish between them. And then some information about heraldry. Probably most of us have not inherited the heraldry. Computer genealogy, software, email etiquette, how you can add the German fonts to your computer, which can be useful. If you're looking for records, you know how it's spelled in English, and you want to see what would it look like in that German print. And then templates, if you want to write letters asking for records. Again, the Family Search Wiki also has examples of that. FAQs, tips for beginners, foreign language terms. And again, this is a German website, so English is a foreign language, along with French, Spanish, and Italian. Then here is the regional research, secular and ecclesiastical affiliations, dependencies, regional portholes, mailing lists, and the like. I have this quote from Teresa Steinkamp McMillan. If GenWiki is the heart and soul of CompGen, regional research is the heart and soul of GenWiki. Probably the most important part. I went ahead and said, look at Bavaria, from my Meisner's coming from Bavaria, and there are screens and screens of all this information, all about Bavaria, what you want to know about the various church dioceses and the like, the Bavarian Empire, the Swabian Empire, Franconian Imperial Circle, knighthood, the Margraves, which are one of those smaller little areas before Napoleon, if you're into the early 1800s and the 1700s. And then look on the right, all the projects they're working now to index all these different casualty lists from Bavaria. That's probably mostly done. Again, lots of more address books. There's more being added to this website all the time. Then the databases, we already went through all them. Feature articles is sort of self-explanatory. They also have in that part photo studios and photographers. Maybe you have an old picture that was brought from Germany, and often printed on the back was the name of the photographer, the photography studio. And you're trying to figure, where is this? When was this? Or whatever. Here's a source of some information on the GenWiki. And then you can search through all that as well. I was listening to a webinar recently, and they were talking about if you wanted to emigrate, you have permission to leave. To show that you paid all the taxes that were due, and in some cases, future taxes you would owe if you didn't leave, had you completed your military service and the like. A number of people sort of snuck out, like my relatives did. They kind of left town, but many did actually apply and got documents. And in the webinar, it says, oh yeah, on the GenWiki, there's lists of all these. So I went through, put in the German term of Auswanderung, and shows up, here's this immigration link list. I look at that, and here's the pages. Emigration from the district of Cuxhaven, from the Grand Duchy of Oldenburg, from Thuringia, from the parish of Venn. So if you again know the location where they live, this is one way to look. Or you work the other way around, if you have a sort of unique name, see in which of these this may show up. They give you an idea. There is one here, the Immigrants to America project, which is done by Brigham Young University. At least when I clicked on this a week or so ago, that link was not functioning. Well, I think they're still there. So they had graduate students going through and documenting a lot of that. We saw at the top, there was also this meta search. This goes through and does a lot of the databases. They're sort of listed here, some of the ones we saw and some additional ones, the Bremen passenger list, immigration from the Grand Duchy of Oldenburg, some of the tombstones and the like, all in one search. So this is probably overdoes things a bit. It's a really broad sort of search, but it is a way for you to do it. It looks at each database, that gives each database 10 seconds to respond. And if you get something, it'll show it to you. If you don't, you just don't get it. So as you can see, CompGen has a wide variety of resources for genealogical researchers. This was just a sampler. I mean, you could spend a week sort of going through this, and I encourage you to, in fact, do that to get an idea of all that's available to you. And again, you'll see the original is in most cases German. There are some parts where you can say, I want English. Those are not necessarily direct transcriptions. But nowadays, with again, the web browsers of Edge and Chrome, you can just right click on the page, say, show it to me in English. And again, as long as you're not working with place names, you want to keep the place names in German. Otherwise you can't. So now Anne, with her allergic cough, will try to manage through, talk a little bit more about those online local family books. Yeah, just do page down,
okay,
or click the mouse.
Okay. He had a lot of luck just going to the website, finding 5 generations back. I never had that kind of luck. I always have to work for it. Okay. So I've looked into these family books quite a bit to see if they would help me with some of my research. So the other names you're going to hear are things like Ortsstippenbuch, Familienbuch. There's all kinds of different terms for these books. Usually they're actual books, okay? And they usually cross-reference people. I'm going to show you an example of what they usually look like. And yes, they do use the common terminology that he mentions. So this is an example from Family Search. This is a book from the town of Borland, and it looks just like our genealogy books where you've got a reference number. And so at the top, we'll see a Jacob. and I put a line there showing that it's a reference number of A, Roman numeral 3, little a, and down at the bottom, his family is shown. So this is typical to what you usually see in most genealogy books. So this is a book for the town, so or it's Sippenbucher or whatever you want to call it. This is what I was kind of used to, but when you go to the webpage, it doesn't look like anything like this, right? I also want to mention before I go to the webpage is the town names. So for example, one person was from Grammington, one from Krakow, another one was born in Starkow. So this is listing who lived in Borland at the time that this record was done, or what they knew about the people in the town, okay? But they come from different places, which made them putting on the website a little more difficult, okay? Now, another example, this is from Archeon. This is a Familienbuch that was in the middle of the church records on Archeon. And so it gives the town of Rosenthal, it gives the house number. By the way, if you ever find the house number, write it down, because you can figure out where that current day house is or that actual location. So it gives, I know this is harder to read. It gives a person, gives his first wife, kids, second wife, kids. So it does give it in a little harder to read format, uses the symbols, handwritten, harder to read, but it gives you a lot of information on who lived in that house and about the family. But of course, if your family doesn't own property, you're going to be at the back. And mine didn't own family. So I'm going to point out Heinrich Ludwig Heinen, and he was from Celle. He wasn't from Rosenthal where he was living. And so now I've got to look in Celle to find this guy. And of course, you see the dotted lines there. Well, my ancestor was George Ludwig, and that ... points to my family. And I had to read all that little print there because that was my family. But that's what I'm used to, working for it, okay? So when you go to this, if you go, you can go directly to this with ofb.genealogy.net. That gets you right to these books. Now, as he showed you, when you scroll down, you see all the various different groups of regions. So this is Baden-Württemberg, Bavaria, Berlin, and Mecklenburg, Pomerania, Lower Saxony. And as he mentioned, down at the bottom, you'll see the areas outside of present-day Germany. Now, not every town's listed here. We're going to give 3 examples very quickly. So first of all, I'm going to go to Celle because I want to find my family, right? That guy was from Celle. So on the side, well, first of all, you'll see that there is a list of various towns. So they're telling you that this database includes more than just Celle. It includes all these little villages north and south of Celle. So you need to read this and see if your village is included in here as well. I'm going to look at the complete list of surnames, and we're going to go to the H's because you can click on the surname. And I'm going to look in here, and I found a lot of Heinens already in this. I'm like, great, I can find my family. So down near the bottom, there's 2, a Hans Heinge and a Hans Henning. Well, when I look at these, I find that Hans Henning there's my Heinrich Ludwig, he was Jürgen Heinrich Ludwig. And this is in German now. This is not the date system that he had, because this is 2/11. This is actually the 2nd of November, okay? And what I did was I verified this by going to Archeon, looking at the actual physical church records. And what I find, his mother's name was not Amma, it was Anna. So there's a typo in here, okay? I noted that. But also I found some additional brothers and sisters. So when I looked at Heingen, Henje, well, there's his mother's name spelled correctly, and there's another kid. So I'm like, well, okay, this has sword and my family in it. So what happens is 2 different records were created from 2 different places, and they created 2 different items here. So I have to write them, and I have to tell them to fix the Anna and that these are the same people, okay? So how am I going to do that? Well, over to the side, there's a contact. This is again in English, so it says Team OFB Sella. That's an email. And you can email them, and what you need to do is send proof. So I would point them to records or put the records in the email and tell them, these are the same people, here you have a typo, to try to fix these records. Now, the other thing important is the source. They got this from GenDo, which I'm not as familiar with because that's a German thing, okay? So again, you can write this team and you can ask them where they got their information from, because maybe some other family member that's related to you submitted that information, okay? So this is a bit of a mess that I need to fix, okay? Now let's go to another example, Passawak. This is in Pomeranian. So we go to the family book for Passawak, and again, go to the complete surname list. And again, another H, sorry. I have a lot of H's. So with Passawak had hardly anybody in it with my surname of Henning. So I went ahead and I contacted the contact, and I literally sent my family in. I said, here's German records, here's all the information about them. And they put it in here. So this is actually something I contributed. So here we've got the children. You'll see most of them are born in Passawak and died in Elgin, Illinois. Cook County, Illinois, or Kane County, Illinois. Elgin split between counties, it's a mess. Anyway, so you have the children here, and he actually put in the children born in Elgin and died in Elgin. He put the whole family in here, even though they weren't all born in Passawak. Now here's the trick. The father is underlined, Johann Ludwig Theodor. He's from Braunkow near Wendisch-Bagendorf. He's not from Passawak. He was in the military and got stationed in Passawak. So now I've got this guy in here who doesn't have anything to do with Passawak, but he had all his kids there and got married there. All right. So I click on him, and the person that put the information in went to my family tree in Ancestry and took all the German records that I had attached to my tree and put all this information in here about, that he was a non-commissioned officer, he was a coachman, he was a resident of Passawak, his immigration, what ship he was on, that he died, when he died, what cemetery he's at, what church he went to, and that he had diabetes. And now we know where we found diabetes guy in our family, but besides that, so he put all these things in here for us and then listed the family group. But there's this red box over here. And what this red box is implying is that there's another similar person in another OFB. Okay, well, I'm going to click on that and see what happens, right? Well, what happened is that, remember, he was from a different village than Passawak. So somebody in that other village was doing work, and now we have to connect the two villages together, okay? So they put these notes, but they didn't have any proof that they were the same person. So that's how kind of they did this. And if they do get a book or something like that, they have a little program they run that takes the information with the numbering system in the book and converts it into these family trees. And then they try to connect the people up. So when I clicked on that red box, I got this mess. All these people that might be him. And I'm looking, half those people don't even have the same name as him. Why would they be him? But there was one, and it's in the OFB Nord Pommern, and it's his same birthday and death date, same locations. So I clicked on it. I want to see what he was. And sure enough, there he is, no wife, no kids, but there's his parents and some of his siblings. So I have to, again, correspond with them and tell them, connect these families up, because they're from two different OFBs. The wife is not listed under Henning. She is listed under her maiden name. So you never look for the wife under her married name. You always look under the maiden name. But one thing that this person did, Christian Schultz did here, was he put a source of my ancestry tree right here in the record. So anybody could go and verify some of the information. She's got the same thing listed, and down at the bottom, again, on her record is her parents and the source information. So look for source information. The last example is Grimmen. My villages wasn't listed here. So I clicked on the next biggest town, and it shows me all the little towns that make up this area. So here's my Kurt Wagendorf, which is where the Henning was from in this Pomerania database here. So the bottom line is, if your ancestor was in the military one place, he was born in another place, or moved at all, like they do nowadays, or moved different regions from the way they broke up these databases, you're going to have to work at it, and you're going to have to, I recommend sending in your information to help everybody. As a member of the partnership, that's why I sent this in, so that we could basically help them and they could help us. So if somebody's looking for that family where they went in the US, which they do, we could help them out, okay? So before we go to questions, I want to mention one other thing before Bernard comes back up, is that the IGGP conference coming up, if you are a member of the Dallas Society and you're going to be physically at the conference, if you could email us at ggg@dallasgenealogy.org. We are going to have a physical booth at the conference. And if you're willing to volunteer to kind of sit there sometime, that'd be great, and help us out managing that booth at the conference. And if you're going to be online, you can virtually go to our booth online as well for the Dallas Society. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Anne. And again, she showed some examples there of primary sources and secondary sources. What she showed from Family Search and Archeon, the actual images, the original books are primary sources. And then all the printed stuff that comes up are secondary, the information she had collected and uploaded, the stuff she found on there as well. So that's why I always want to try to find the primary source whenever you possibly can. Okay, so now let's look at questions. We have one here in the room.
You said something about partnership. That talked about partnership between our group and someone, or that when you join on the site, I don't say about participate, you participate, or you can be a member after the membership you're paying, then you participate or not. But when you're talking about partnership,
I'm asking.
Okay, the partnership is a partnership of societies.
okay.
So that it's a great collaboration that way. And that's how it sort of works, has its own little hierarchy of volunteers who sort of lead things. Anne's on one of the committees helping to organize the conference. So essentially, we, as the German Genealogy Group in North Texas, are a partner society. So all of us who are members of the German Genealogy Group then have the advantage of being a member of a partner society. Okay, let me check chat to see if we've got questions there. Nothing there. Anybody online, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, you're welcome to do that. And we'll wait a little bit so you find all the right buttons to click.
And doesn't
Yes, we have a question.
doesn't the IGGP, even though the discount period is done, aren't they doing some kind of contest for people to find something in the speakers' profiles to be able to continue getting a discount for IGGP if you still want to get a discount?
Okay, yeah, the question is for the conference registration. I showed the prices, but they are offering sort of a unique thing of a discount as sort of a quiz where they are providing hints to particular speakers. One of the hints was the person lives in the oldest town in their village, I think I saw. And if you, using the hints, can identify the speaker and then submit that, then you will get a discount on the registration. I suspect it's only for the first person who solves the clues to do that, but that's ongoing. I think you can find them on their Facebook page, and I'm trying to think if we've been posting them on our Facebook.
I have not.
Haven't, but if you look on the IGGP has its own Facebook page, And also on their, I think their website you can find. And it's just a way to get people interested. Like I said, the deadline for the early bird discount is passed. $300 for virtual, $325 for in person is still a little bit expensive. But this is an opportunity to get people involved and sort of looking through the program to get an idea of who are the people this presenter is going to be and see if you can find out that information. So it's almost like what, a scavenger hunt for a speaker today, but it's a list of neat little ways to get a discount if you want to play detective. And as genealogists, we're all detectives all the time anyhow.
Nancy says it's for anyone who figures it out, the discount.
Okay, Nancy, who's probably online, said anybody figures it out. So it can be more than one person, which means they're not going to publish who the answer is. But they'll be doing several of those between now and again, the conference is in June. Any other questions? As a longtime teacher, I always quietly count to 10. People have to think of a question, phrase it, and then they're going to ask it. Or if you're on Zoom, you're trying to unmute, where's that darn button? So, okay.
Hey, I have a
Hearing none,
question.
we appreciate your attention. Again, there's the CompGen website. Take a good bit of time to just click on anything and everything. You won't break it. And you'll discover lots and lots of information. As Ann pointed again, a lot of it will be secondary. It'll lead you in the right direction and find information, hopefully about your ancestors, and then direct you to the primary sources. So we'll now try to figure out how to stop the recording. There we go. And we'll have this recording available probably within a day or so on the website.
This has been a production of the Dallas Genealogical Society. If you're already a member, thank you. Your fees have been supporting these and other society activities. If you're not yet a member, please consider joining now. Go to dallasgenealogy.org and click on the membership tab.